This is the first recording in 2013. Apparently this is the next thing that has to go out. And this is related to my Fourth Dimension series and the works of Nassim Haramein. And before I start this, I want to introduce a concept which is the non-vibrational cosmos, which would be a cosmos in which there is no vibration occurring, and therefore nothing would be discernible. It could be infinite in size, and it's very quiet and peaceful there. There might be beings there, there might not be beings there. But the non-vibrational cosmos is a possibility among the concepts of infinite numbers and kinds of universes. And if you wandered in there and were noisy, you might receive an unwelcome reception from the peaceful inhabitants, or from such a bad experience you might have a fear of dark rooms, because it reminds you of what happened when you stumbled into an infinitely sized non-vibrational cosmos. This information is translated out of Iranian. It's from Persia from 1894 and beyond. This is called the beyond state of God, the first urge, and the cycle of evolution and involution of consciousness. And for the sake of expediency here, I'm not talking about God as the traditional supreme being. This information works whether that is the actual God or supreme being, or if these writers have anthropomorphized this phenomenon into God in quotation marks. But it sounds an awful lot like the non-vibrational cosmos. There's also a concept called the serenity of beingness, where one is all, knows all, and is all powerful, and yet not doing anything with that. So I'm going to go slowly because this requires step-by-step following. And there's no other way to get this material. The title again is the Beyond State of God. To begin with the Beyond the Beginning, there is the original state of the Beyond state of God. This is the original state of God is. In this original state of God is, unbounded, absolute vacuum prevails. And if you want to learn about what's in the vacuum, please see the work of Nassim Haramein, because he has nailed it. In this absolute vacuum, There is neither any manifestation of the conscious or unconscious state of God, nor is there manifestation of the consciousness or unconsciousness of God. Neither is there the unlimited I, the divine ego, or the universal ego. Nor is there the limited I, or the individual ego. Neither is there universal mind, nor is there limited mind. Neither is there unbounded energy, nor is there limited energy. Neither is there the universal body, nor is there the limited body. Neither are there universes, nor are there worlds. There is not even consciousness of either the consciousness or of the unconsciousness. This state is absolutely the original, unbounded, absolute vacuum state of God. When it is said, God is, it describes the state which prevails beyond the beginning of creation. The state of God is also called the original divine sound sleep state of God in the beyond state. The God is state is the state of infinitude. Infinitude, by virtue of being infinite, is everything. That is, everything is the nature of infinitude. Everything, by virtue of being everything, embodies even nothing, or else everything can never mean everything. This nothing is latent in the everything. But nothing, being literally nothing, at the very being of being nothing, is nothing at all. As this nothing is latent in the everything, the nothingness of the nothing is embedded in the everything as the latency. Thus, in the infinitude of the God is state, all that is latent in the nature of infinity, which is everything, is the nothing. Therefore, anything that is latent in everything is of the nothing. In short, except for the infinity of the infinitude, all things are latent in the God is state of everything. And all that is latent is of the nothing, with all its aspects as nothingness. In the God is state, where the nothing is latent, automatically by the nature of nothingness, consciousness also exists as nothing. Accordingly, consciousness in the beyond state of God is ever and ever latent in God, who is by nature the everything, infinite and unlimited and unbounded. Thus, automatically, by his very nature of being the everything, God, in the God is state, has in him ever and ever infinite power, infinite knowledge, infinite bliss, and all that is infinitely glorious or beautiful. Because God is the everything and the infinite, the opposite of the everything, which is the nothing, must be the most finite. Therefore, the nothing is latent in the God is state as the most finite, or in the infinite state of God, which is the everything, there is latent the most finite state of the nothing. It is only natural that when this latent and most finite nothing manifests, it ought to manifest as most finite. But it is a most paradoxical fact that when this most finite nothing manifests, its manifestation gradually expands to infinity. The thing that gives infinity to this most finite nothing is God's own latent trio nature of infinite power, infinite knowledge, and infinite bliss, which, by virtue of being the nature of God, obviously pervades the infinitude of the God is state latently. Naturally, this infinite trio nature also envelops this most finite nothing when latent in the infinity of the everything. Now what drops out here is law of three, anything that has to do with three forces, like the Gurdjieff-Ouspensky materials. As above, so below, and where little tiny particles come from. The next section is called the point. Therefore, when this most finite nothing becomes manifested as nothingness, the manifestation of the most finite nothing closely linked with and stretched forth by the simultaneous projection of the latent, all-pervading, infinite trio nature of God gradually expands ad infinitum and gets apparently manifested as infinite nothingness, or the creation. And hence the universe of nothingness, which is illusory, can be called God's shadow. And God being infinite, his shadow is also infinite. The whole creation has come out of the nothing. Out of the nothing, two things have emerged: evolution and production. Out of the nothing, 7 states of gas came into being. The 7th evolved state is hydrogen. Out of the 7th gaseous state, evolution and production came into being. Creation can be reconciled with evolution because all is in 7 stages. 7 stages of production, 7 stages of evolution, and 7 stages of involution. So it is said that God created the universe in 7 days. From the nothing, most finite shadow and infinite shadow emerged simultaneously. When it manifests, the nothing, which is most finite and latent in the everything, projects out from a most finite point in the everything, where the nothing is as most finite, at its most finite, is embodied. The most finite point from where the nothing projects out as nothingness is called the creation point, or the point. This creation point is naturally also in the everything, which means in God in the beyond state. So the most finite nothing projects as the creation out of the infinite everything through the most finite creation point into the infinity of the infinitude of the God is state. In short, when the most finite nothing gets projected as nothingness through the most finite creation point, which is also in the infinity pervaded by the infinite trio nature of God, the projection of the most finite nothingness, closely linked with and upheld by the all-pervading infinite trio nature of God, gradually expands ad infinitum and manifests apparently as infinite nothingness or as infinite creation. So this is the point of entrance into our experience, where all this stuff came from, and standing on the earth in a meat body, all that energy is called the Big Bang, and it's scary and unhabable. But as an infinitely small entrance point coming out of the infinite everything of God, it's not that big a deal. So there is no Big Bang, it's more like a leak. The next section is called the whim, or lahar. The cause which led the most finite nothing, latent in the infinite everything, to manifest itself as infinite nothingness is the original cause, called the cause. This cause is just nothing but the whim of God. This original whim can also be called the first word in quotation marks uttered by God. Who am I? The infinitude of the God is state made God absolutely independent. And by virtue of being absolutely independent, it is but natural for God to exercise his infinite whim, to experience and enjoy his own infinity. To exercise a whim is always the mark of an independent nature, because it is whimsicality that always colors the independent nature. It is the original infinite whim which is responsible for giving cause to the latent all that was of the nothing to manifest as nothingness. Well, this concept appears at the beginning of the Bible, Genesis, where God moved upon the face of the water. And there's something there about him speaking a word, the word of God. And that's taken out of these ancient texts and placed into the Bible. But before God exercised his original infinite whim to make manifest the latent all that was of the nothing, this whim of God was itself latent as the nothing in the everything of the infinitude of absolutely independent God in the God is state. How is it then possible for the latent original infinite whim to surge in God and make manifest itself and all that is latent of the nothing as nothingness? Whim, after all, is a whim, and by its very nature, it is such that why, wherefore, when can find no place in its nature. A whim may come at any moment. It may come now, or after a few months, or after years, and it may not come at all. Similarly, the original infinite whim, after all, is a whim, and two, it is the whim of God in the state of infinitude. This whim may not surge in God at all, and if it surges, either at any moment, or after thousands of years, or after a million cycles, it need not be surprising. Thus it is that the original infinite whim of God in the state of infinitude once surged, and it surged both spontaneously and all of a sudden in absolutely independent God, who is eternally eternal. Hence, this whim which once surged, once began in the beginning of all things, in creation. In short, this original infinite latent whim of God in the state of infinitude, once it surged in God, who is absolutely independent, made itself manifest, and simultaneously with its manifestation, it manifested the latent all that was of the nothing as nothingness. Thus the whim created the nothing. Let us recapitulate how infinite nothing came out of the most finite everything. God beyond is infinite everything. Everything may be compared to an infinite, limitless ocean. Therefore, this limitless ocean is infinite everything. Thus, every drop in the ocean is most finite everything. In short, if infinite ocean is infinite everything, then every drop of the ocean is most finite everything. Before the whim surges in the limitless ocean, and before creation is manifested, the creation point, the om point, through which the creation is ejected, is itself in that limitless ocean as infinite everything, because prior to the surging of the whim, perfect tranquility prevailed and pervaded the limitless ocean. There was no question of drops of the ocean, and there was no separateness. There was limitless ocean as infinite everything. At the instant when the whim surged in the infinite everything, the creation point, or om point, manifested as most finite everything. Infinite nothing was latent in the infinite everything. But when the whim surged, the infinite nothing got manifested through most finite everything, which is the om point. Thus, through the most finite everything, the infinite nothing is ejected, gradually manifesting itself as expanding ad infinitum. Simultaneously with the projection of the latent nothing and with the manifestation of nothingness, the consciousness which existed as nothing, latent in the infinitude of the God is state, also got projected and manifested itself gradually as the consciousness of God, and made God experience himself as God, the creator of all things, that projected out of his state of the everything as nothingness. Whereupon, gradually gaining full consciousness, God in the state of creator became entangled in the maze of most finite nothingness, found as infinite, stretched out and upheld through his own infinite trio nature. The paradoxical irony is that the infinity itself of God makes it infinitely difficult for God to escape the false apparent infinity of nothingness, which goes on expanding ad infinitum. Through the closely linked infinite trio nature of God, which is infinite power, infinite knowledge, and infinite bliss. But this entanglement is absolutely necessary in order that God, in the infinitude of the God is state, should gain consciousness fully and completely for himself and of his infinite reality. And in this way, experience consciously his unbounded, unlimited, infinite trio nature of infinite power, infinite knowledge, and infinite bliss. The fundamental fact is that full consciousness once gained can never be lost. It remains eternally, regardless of whether that consciousness fully gained is the consciousness of the false nothingness experienced as real, or whether that consciousness is the consciousness of reality itself. Eventually, consciousness does make God realize his own reality after that same consciousness has attained complete maturity. Consciousness is fully matured to realize reality only after it is nurtured by the apparent awareness of the false. This awareness of the false as real becomes so intensified during the course of the evolution of consciousness that the consciousness, steeped in false awareness, makes God aware only of the false, which is experienced by God as the real. That is, God as creator falsely experiences the manifestation of the nothing as real and everything. In order that the latent consciousness of God in the God is state should make it possible for God to realize his own eternal reality, the projection of the latent consciousness in everything, which, when projected outwards, becomes focused on the false infinity of nothingness, should be withdrawn inwardly. By such an inward withdrawal, the focus of the same consciousness becomes centered on the infinity of everything, from which it had projected outwards and given rise to the experience of infinite nothingness, rather than the experience of the infinity of everything. As said before, when the projected consciousness withdraws inwards or undergoes full and complete involution, that nothingness, which was once experienced as reality, automatically vanishes for the consciousness which is now focused completely on the eternal reality of the infinitude of God. In short, there is no new consciousness to be attained to realize reality, the eternal. It is the same consciousness, latent in the everything, which, when it emerges out of the nothing, first gradually evolves and associating with the nothingness, then experiences the nothingness as real. When the evolution of this consciousness is complete and full, the same consciousness makes God experience the false nothing, which expands ad infinitum as real and infinite. Again, when the same full and complete consciousness reaches full and complete maturity through its own involution, it realizes infinite reality as the only reality, and gives God the experience of his own real and eternal infinite state. God in his original state of infinitude is eternally infinite through his infinite, unbounded, and unlimited trio nature of infinite power, infinite knowledge, and infinite bliss. As God eternally is, the only virtual difference between the original state of God and the new states of God that he acquires is that of the consciousness gained progressively through the impressions of the projected nothingness. God, in his original state of God is not conscious of his infinite, eternal existence, nor of his own infinite nature, though he exists infinitely and eternally. Due to his own infinite whim, God acquires the consciousness of his reality and realizes his infinite, eternal, unlimited self to experience his unbounded, unlimited, and infinite trio nature. Thus, God, now with his newly acquired state of eternal consciousness, is consciously and eternally aware of his original beyond the beyond state of God is, which is forever and ever unconscious of the infinitude of his own God is state. Therefore, the goal is to realize the eternal and infinite God state consciously. As already described, the original state of God is that state of unbounded, absolute vacuum where God is and consciousness is not. This state is the original divine sound sleep state of God, beyond the beginning of creation. The original infinite whim of God as the cause is responsible for breaking the spell of the original divine sound sleep state of God. And the result, which is creation, is called the effect. In order to grasp clearly the divine sound sleep state and understand more clearly all that follows, immediately after the original infinite whim surges in God, bestirring him from the divine sound sleep, let the divine sound sleep state of God be compared with the sound sleep of man. This sound sleep state of man is literally the same original divine sound sleep state of God. God in the God is state is eternally in the original divine sound sleep state, whereas God in the human state daily experiences alternately the sound sleep state and the awake state. The infinite, impressionless, and formless eternal God experiences himself as finite, limited, inanimate, or animate forms, or beings only because of the advent of that first most finite impression of the nothing that manifested as nothingness. At one stage in the evolution of consciousness, the impressions of the nothing impart to God the experience of the human state. Now, this kind of awareness change is what happens to people who say, I realized that I was God, or I am God. And the only problem with that is if you say, I'm God, and you're not. Because everyone is on different levels of having this experience, and everyone is connected to the primal force. So in this part of the century, we're getting a clearer picture of what's going on with us. And it would be very interesting to be a race of beings who knew that we were all part of God consciousness on a journey together. And that could become the closest thing we would have to a substitute for the old religions we've been running on for the last 10 to 20,000 years. And through the centuries, leaders, wise men, saints, teachers who know this have been trying to get the word out. And now that we have electronic dissemination of information, there's a better chance of that than ever before. So I personally am not concerned using the word God. There, you can have that as God in heaven, or it could be anthropomorphized force. This could be just more physics in the background. But space itself is a created phenomenon. And Nassim Haramein, genius, please look at his stuff, says that space is 99.99999% empty space, and the remaining little one is the actual solid matter. So he's asking us to look at, maybe it's the space that informs the matter with qualities, rather than the matter is an event in a nothingness. The nothing is actually more important than the apparent something. So the physics is going to change from looking at what we call solid matter and dealing with that to looking at the other 99.99999%, which may be logically more important, to see what we can make of that. And it looks like hyperdimensional physics and consciousness theory belong together in finding out how to play a better game here, which is one aspect of this. It's a pretty far stretch to talk about ending the game of here. The cosmoses above and below us seem so huge and unconfrontable, or small and uncontrollable, but the laws that govern them are all the same. And along the line, this is, I think, a pretty pure extract of what goes on for teaching in the mystery schools. And it could still be just the theory of. And I noticed in India they have something similar to this, and they have a drawing of a man sleeping in a meadow, and he's the dreaming god, and the time scale of his dream lines up with cosmological time scales of thousands, millions, and billions of years. And out of his belly button is coming a dream, and in the dream there's the same or similar man sleeping in a meadow in the middle of the dream. And this is given as a visual representation of what's going on with the cosmos, cosmology and time scales, although the information is never handed out at the same time as to what this really means. But those who work on the Indian cosmology would have figures that tally to be the same time scales as other cosmologies. Here's Genesis. This is all we were given in the West. In the beginning of creation, when God made heaven and earth, the earth was without form and void, with the darkness over the face of the abyss, and a mighty wind that swept over the surface of the waters. God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and he separated light from darkness. Slightly different translation. In the beginning, God prepared, formed, fashioned, and created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and an empty waste, and darkness was upon the face of the very great deep. The Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. Well, that's all we got to have of this in the West. It's a little mention of a similar theory. Now here's some stuff from the I Ching, which is how this unconscious power of God appears in the human world. That which lets now the dark, now the light appear is the Tao. As a continuer, it is good. As a completer, it is essence. The primal powers never come to a standstill. The cycle of becoming continues uninterruptedly. The reason is that between the two primal powers there arises again and again a state of tension, a potential that keeps the powers in motion and causes them to unite, whereby they are constantly regenerated. The Tao brings this about without ever becoming manifest. The kind man discovers it and calls it kind. The wise man discovers it and calls it wise. The people use it day by day and are not aware of it. For the way of the superior man is rare. It manifests itself as kindness, but conceals its workings. It gives life to all things, but it does not share the anxieties of the holy sage. Its glorious power, its great field of action, are of all things the most sublime. It possesses everything in complete abundance. This is the great field of action. It renews everything daily. This is its glorious power. As a begetter of all things, it is called change. As that which completes the primal images, it is called a creative. And that which imitates them, it is called a receptive. Namely, that underlying reality, there is a world of archetypes, and reproductions of these make up the real things in the material world. The world of archetypes is heaven, or the fourth, fifth, and sixth dimensions. The world of reproductions is the earth, their energy, here, matter. The creative, there in heaven, the creative, here the receptive. But is the same Tao that is active both in the creative and the receptive. In that it serves for exploring the laws of number and thus for knowing the future, it is called revelation. In that it serves to infuse an organic coherence into the changes, it is called the work. That aspect of it which cannot be fathomed in terms of the light and the dark is called spirit. In their alternation and reciprocal effect, the two fundamental forces serve to explain all the phenomena in the world. Nonetheless, there remains something that cannot be explained in terms of the interaction of these forces. A final why. This ultimate meaning of the Tao is the spirit, the divine, the unfathomable in it, which must be revered in silence. Here's a little hint of who the people in the previous civilization were. The holy sages were able to survey all the confused diversities under heaven. They observed forms and phenomena and made representations of things and their attributes. The holy sages were able to survey all the movements under heaven. They contemplated the way in which these movements met and became interrelated, to take their course according to eternal laws. Then they appended judgments to distinguish between the good fortune and misfortune indicated. They speak of the most confused diversities without arousing aversion. They speak of what is most mobile without causing confusion. This comes from the fact that they observed before they spoke and discussed before they moved. Through observation and discussion, they perfected the changes and transformations. Here's a little more on them. The Master said, the changes, what do they do? The changes disclose things, complete affairs, and encompass all ways on earth. This and nothing else. For this reason, the holy sages use them to penetrate all wills on earth, and to determine all fields of action on earth, and to settle all doubts on earth. In this way, the holy sages purified their hearts, withdrew, and hid themselves in the secret. They concerned themselves with good fortune and misfortune in common with other men. They were divine, hence they knew the future. They were wise, hence they stored up the past. Who is it who can do this? Only the reason and clear-mindedness of the ancients, their knowledge and wisdom, their unremitting divine power. Therefore they fathomed the Tao of heaven and understood the situations of men. Thus they invented these divine things in order to meet the need of men. The holy sages fasted for this reason in order to make their natures divinely clear. And here's some food for thought since we're in the middle of the I Ching here. The inferior man is not ashamed of unkindness and does not shrink from injustice. If no advantage beckons, he makes no effort. If he is not intimidated, he does not improve himself. But if he is made to behave correctly in small matters, he is careful in large ones. This is fortunate for the inferior man. If good does not accumulate, it is not enough to make a name for a man. If evil does not accumulate, it is not strong enough to destroy a man. Therefore, the inferior man thinks to himself, goodness in small things has no value, and so neglects it. He thinks small sins do no harm, and so does not give them up. Thus his sins accumulate until they can no longer be covered up, and his guilt becomes so great that it can no longer be wiped out. Here's some information on what the nothing has become, as opposed to the creative force. It's called the receptive in this system of the I Ching. The receptive does not combat the creative, but completes it. It represents nature in contrast to spirit, earth in contrast to heaven, space as against time, the female maternal as against male paternal. However, as applied to human affairs, the principle of this complementary relationship is found not only in the relation between man and woman, but also between prince and minister, between father and son. Even in the individual, this duality appears in the coexistence of the spiritual world and the world of the senses. But strictly speaking, there is no real dualism here because there is a clearly defined hierarchical relationship between the two principles. In itself, of course, the receptive is just as important as the creative, but the attribute of devotion defines the place occupied by this primal power in relation to the creative. For the receptive must be activated and led by the creative. Then it is productive of good. Only when it abandons this position and tries to stand as an equal side by side with the creative does it become evil. The result then is opposition to and struggle against the creative, which is productive of evil to both. Only because nature in its myriad forms corresponds with the myriad impulses of the creative can it make these impulses real. Nature's richness lies in its power to nourish all living things. Its greatness lies in its power to give them beauty and splendor. Thus it prospers all that lives. It is the creative that begets things, but they are brought to birth by the receptive. Applied to human affairs, therefore, what the hexagram indicates is action in conformity with the situation. Well, I hope this is of use to some of you. It looks like the world is going to be heading towards a hyperdimensional physics world and a world of cosmic consciousness of 6 dimensions is going to change what we think we see. And the new civilization will be more peaceful than the one we have now. So I ask you to vote with your feet and with your wallets and stop participating in the old civilization and join the new civilization game. All civilizations come to an end. They last about 800 years from start to finish, and at the halfway point, the civilization that's going to replace them starts up and arrives 400 years later at the absolute downfall of the previous civilization. And where we are in time is at the far end of an octave or 8 units of civilizations. And the end of this grouping is 2035. Right now we're in what's called and was predicted as the electromagnetic civilization. So this is the Kairos time at the very end of this octave of civilizations and this civilization. So this is Kairos time is when all things are possible. All bets are off. So if you're going to make a move, do it now, between now and 2035. Because the direction we go for the next 12,500 years will be decided between now and 2035. And although we're entering the age of Aquarius, which is an inhalation stage for the Earth, as opposed to an exhalation part of the breath, things are going to be better for the next 12,500 years. But the rats are chewing at our possibilities for the future and trying to keep the same suppressive scene that we exist in now going. So take a look at that. Take a look at the news. Take a look at where you'd like to be, what kind of world you'd like to be living in, and vote with your feet and with your wallets. And Happy New Year, 2013.